watching Business Q&A, and this week the spotlight is on the upcoming Brand Africa 100 initiative, celebrating and recognizing some of the best brands that the continent has to offer, with my guest and award-winning Pan-African marketer, Dr. Thebe Ikalafeng. Thebe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Nontobeko.
Can you just break the foundations for us? It has been going on, I think it's on its 15th year, to be correct?
15 years. So 15 years ago, we started the initiative, and the idea was to try and create a reliable barometer, to run a barometer of the state of brands in Africa. And because at that time, we already intuitively know that Western brands and Asian brands are doing well in the continent, but we didn't really have a finger on the pulse in terms of exactly how they are doing. So we've now, 15 years later, we know for certain that it's about only 20% of the brands that Africans admire are made in Africa. Now we know that we've got an uphill of 80% opportunity to try and redress, or rather to try and get Africans to love themselves. That's how I look at it.
15 years, but your work expands even further. I think you've touched on a lot on African brand equity. Can you just explain that for us, and what can be expected from this year's initiative or event?
Well, when we started off with 8 countries. We looked at 8 countries, tried to understand, and that was in 2011. Look at 8 countries in terms of the state of brands then. We're now up to 31 countries and touching on every single economic region in the continent, East, West, North, South, Central Africa. And collectively, they account for 85% of the continent's economy, and 85% of the continent's population of 1.4 billion people. So that's the extent of the research that we do in partnership with our colleagues from Geopol and from Kantar and Brand Leadership, and to try and understand just the state of the brands in the continent, and also in South Africa as well, particularly. So what can you expect this year? Very interesting this year. So this year we've expanded our questions. This year, to me, the highlight is we will be inducting into the Hall of Fame the brands which have been a standout in the continent and in the country for the last 15 years, featuring on the rankings, but also being impactful in the continent. But second and most important, because South Africa and Africa is hosting the G20, we are also putting a lens on which brands come from the G20 countries, and how do they compare with the brands from the BRICS countries, and how do they compare with African brands. And I'm quite excited to see how that works out. But also knowing that, and we do that, by the way, because not just because the G20 is coming to Africa and South Africa particularly, but also because of the shifting geopolitics in the world. We want to see how are we doing. Do we have the leverage, if you will? Because I think, to me, brands are a leverage for a country, because they help a country to understand itself. It's a lens into the country's competitiveness, a lens into its image, and a lens into enterprise as well. So that's why we want to look at those G20. The third highlight for me is looking at, if you look at it continent-wise, 70% under the age of 30. I think in South Africa as well could be perhaps similar as well. And also we're looking at the state of unemployment, 40-50% unemployed people, but they all buy brands. So this year, the third highlight is we're looking at brands by generations. We're looking at the Gen Zs versus the Gen Xs versus the millennials versus the baby boomers, and trying to understand, do they like the same brands, or what brands do they admire? And of course, so that's the generation. Of course, we're also going to look at the top 100, as we always do, and we're going to look at the sustainability brands, so the brand that really does good for society, for people, and for the environment. So to me, those are the highlights, in addition to the fact that we look at the categories across telecoms, across fast-moving consumer goods, beverages, and all those. But to me, those 4 highlights are quite significant in terms of what we've done for the studies. So yeah, and I think it's appropriate, being this is our 15th anniversary.
You've given us such a holistic approach to this, and I love how you touched on just the economic or financial opportunities, even when looking at the G20 Summit, and how this really highlights Africa as a continent, especially South Africa. What sets this event apart?
Well, what sets this study apart more than the event itself, what sets the study apart is the fact that first, it is Africa focused. One, it's a pure Africa focus. You know, there's tons of studies on brands around the world and around the world rather, and even in South Africa and different other countries do stuff. This is the first Pan-African one. It's authentically African. I think what also sets it apart is that it is research and data-based. So we're not sitting around the corner in a dark room and doing any minimal and deciding who is the best brand or who is the best organization that does great for the continent or is admired by Africans. It's all research-based. As I've said, Geopol and Kantar do the study for us for the last 15 years. And also we have studies, we have other research partners around the continent as well. Morocco, Algeria, Namibia, also have research partners that we bring into the pot for those areas that we can't do. The third thing is that it's very inclusive. It's inclusive as in I've said the breadth of it, but also inclusive in language. We do this in 8 languages.
Impressive.
In Arabic, in Swahili, in French, in English, etc. So it's very, very comprehensive. But to me, the most important differentiator about this is that it is brand neutral. It is unsponsored and free of commercial influence. So you cannot pay your way into being admired by Africans, but what you can do a better job on your everyday job and build a great brand. And that's how you earn your rankings on your state on the rankings.
And you cannot pay your way into the rankings. I love that you touched on that. But before we part, can you just share information on where our audience can get more information about the study itself and the event?
So they can all go to brand.africa, www.brand.africa. That's our website where we have the reports for the last 14 years. You can find the reports in there. And of course, upcoming sometime in June or so, we will announce the South African results. And Business Day, who's our media partner in South Africa, will publish a comprehensive supplement that looks at the study. We can look at the supplement from last year, which, as you know, last year the #1 brand in South Africa was Batu. And that was impressive because it's a brand that was started 10 years or so ago, and in the midst of the other bigger brands in the country. So you can find it in the supplements from last year. You can look at last year's results. You can get into brand.africa. You can follow us on the socials at brandafrica54 on the Instagram or brandafrica on Twitter. That's where you can find us. That's where you find all the information about this incredible initiative that we're all proud to be associated with.
Thank you for joining us there, Thebe. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for having us. I hope we're gonna see you at the announcement. I can't wait.
Definitely. That was Thebe Ikalafeng, award-winning Pan-African marketer and brand strategist, giving us an exclusive into this year's Brand Africa 100 Best Brands Initiative. Until next time, goodbye.